Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Outrank podcast. It's just the two of us today. It's me and my co-host, Steve Lewis. Steve, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. A nice long weekend. So took the 4-day weekend. To get kids had one, so didn't have much of a choice.
Don't be so humble. Tell them what the importance of today is.
All right, fine. Today is my birthday. So lucky me, my birthday fell on a holiday.
Yeah.
Love it. Happens every few years.
Hey, you got to enjoy it while you can, right? It's a long weekend. You better enjoy it while you got it.
Yeah, even though the focus is always, on the kids because they're kids.
Yeah, but we're kids too. We're just
Yeah,
grown kids.
yeah. My son actually came in the room this morning because my wife let me sleep in, which was finally nice to happen. Um, so because my daughter keeps waking us up at like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, even on weekends, So eventually, your body just kind of naturally starts waking up at that time frame.
Yep.
But she decided to wake up at 3 o'clock this morning, and so I was like, "Yeah, this is gonna suck." So I got up with her, and then my wife, like, because the crying woke her up, so she's like, "Well, I'll just take her. You can go back to bed." And I was like, "I love you." I
it's
went I went to back to bed and eventually fell back asleep, and so my son came in this morning and woke me up. Daddy, time to get up. Happy birthday. So I was like,
That's
oh,
pretty cool, man.
yeah.
That's pretty cool. How old we turning today? What's the big number?
42.
42 years old. Oh, wow.
Yep.
Uh, and your body feels like it's 65.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
I think that's every one
Yeah.
of us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
You gotta love that steady supply of ibuprofen, right?
yep, absolutely. And it's funny because I mentioned earlier, like we're just big kids. Like I'm coaching my kids' football team, so I get to go out there and actually be around kids playing a game that I loved,
Right.
and try to pass along some of the values that I pass along. And well, it kind of brings us into today a little bit. There wasn't a show planned today, so this is completely impromptu. We just kind of threw it up at the very last minute, which is okay because it's always fun to do, right?
Right, of course.
So I guess what the thought about it is I've been thinking a lot about like some of the things that we've gone through as vets and prior first responders and how it translates into the civilian world, right? Because it's not very easy to just get out and then, hey, by the way, you're on your own, right? Like because
Yeah.
and I want to tie it into what you currently do, where you're a financial advisor and a financial specialist on this as well a little bit. And one of the things I was kind of thinking about, especially with you here, is when you are in the military, you are guaranteed a paycheck on the 1st and the 15th. So it's a little easier to budget out because the military does it for you. They just give you, you're guaranteed a
Yes.
check. Your salary every 1st and the 15th. Like it's
Yes.
guaranteed.
And if it's off by a few dollars, you're like, what happened?
Right, right. But you don't even have to check the bank account. You know it's going to be there on the 1st and you
Yes.
know it's going to be there on the 15th. Now, when you get into the civilian world and when you retire, now you're going to one paycheck a month if you're retired, or if you're in prior military and you're got the disability, it's one paycheck a month. And then on top of that, when you start a new job, it's not the 1st and the 15th. It's biweekly or weekly, or it all depends. And then you have your hours that you have to add up and all that stuff. And
Right.
it can really throw a kind of like a monkey wrench in your little thought process when you financially
Absolutely.
advise, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I guess my question to you right now is like when you're helping veterans out, or you're helping somebody that's still in the military out prepare for retirement or prepare for separation, or you're helping veterans out that have been separated and they still haven't navigated that financial process, what are some of the things you look for?
So that is an excellent question, and I can speak from personal as well as, clientele that I've helped, right? So for me, I am now an independent contractor, right? So I don't get a salary and everything. So what I make throughout the month is what I get paid. And from my company, I still only get paid once a month. I get paid at the end of the month for all of the commissions that I earned throughout the entire month. So it's the beginning of the month is very glorious for me. So because I get my end of month pay, right, for my job, and then I get the technically end of the month pay for VA disability and for retirement, right?
Hmm.
Because that's always done in arrears, so you're getting paid for the time that you've earned, right? Not the
Right.
time coming up. So, yeah, the beginning of the month. So it kind of makes it challenging from a budgeting standpoint because when you're in the military and you're the first and 15th, you plan your budget out around that, right? Like, I mean, my wife is still active duty, so she still gets first and the 15th paycheck. So we still have some of that budget left over. But, when you plan, okay, what are your big ones, right? You have your mortgages, you have, electric bills or anything like that that may or may not come out, on the first of the month or, whatever. But then you have things that are due the second half of the month, right? And you kind of try and strategically plan so not everything is at the beginning of the month, right? Not everything is in the middle of the month. You kind of spread it out a little bit, right? And I know there for a while, even whenever I was in, we had some bills that were due in the first half of the month, but because of mortgages and everything else, you you kind of run out of money, you know. Um, but we had excess money every month, but it was because of the second half, right? So what we would do is a lot of our bills and a lot of everything would be paid on credit cards. And then when our second half of the month came in, then we would pay those off. So we never carried a balance, right? Plus we get the reward points. You can't
Right. Right.
knock
Right.
that, right? So
Right. I mean,
we could
rewards
use
points are
that
always
to,
good.
yeah. I mean, even though now we're still, I would say better than financially stable, we still use the credit cards for everything just to get the rewards. We just pay them off every month. So, but for someone that if you retire, sure, you're going to get a pension. You may or may not get, some form of disability check. If you're retiring, it means you've been in at least 20 years, unless you're getting medically retired. So you're likely to get at least 50%, right? I say likely because nothing's guaranteed. But so you're likely to get two paychecks at the beginning of the month, right? And depending on your rank and everything else, depends on how much all of that is, right? And your disability rating. So it might be, enough to cover some bills. It might not be, it just depends on your situation. But then, yeah, you have your job, right? And so a lot of jobs are, every other Friday or maybe they're bi-weekly, bi-monthly,
Hmm.
whatever the case is, and every place is different. That's what makes it hard. The stability and the predictability of the military made it super nice because you could literally know months in advance exactly when you were going to get paid. And most of us use a lot of those banks that pay you like a day early, like
Yep.
USA, Navy
Yep.
Fed, right? They all give you like they release your money like a day early, so it's like, all right, today's the 15th, but it's a Saturday, so that means everybody's getting paid on Friday, which means I actually get paid on Thursday. So it's like, sometimes it was hard because you would have like 2.5 weeks, the way that the months laid out. So those were a
But you
little
were
bit of a
able to prepare.
stretch.
But you were able to prepare for those, right? Because you
Correct, because you knew
knew
they were coming.
they were coming. Exactly.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that's the unique part of it.
Yeah.
And so the reason I wanted to ask you some of these questions, financial stuff, is because again, we're talking about like people that have been out, and we're trying to help our community of to better themselves financially, professionally, and in life, right? And that's one of the things that we were asking about. And I've noticed that, and not just noticed, but it's one of those things. I think the older you get, the more you start looking at those finances. If you have somebody or an A1C or a private or somebody an E2 that just did their 3 or 4 years, or E4 that did 4 years, and they're like, I'm punching my ticket and I'm getting out. Like, unless they had a family and they lived in the dorms the entire time, like they had no budgeting, right? Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
there's no budgeting there because they're getting a Dodge Charger with a 22% APR and a $5,000 down payment. So you're talking about like a lot of different aspects and values, but even those, I think it's even harder sometimes for the higher ranking officials that have been so used to a steady paycheck, that have been so used to for 20 years. They knew what they were getting paid on. They didn't even have to open their bank account, right? They
Hmm.
didn't have to check their or budget their books because they knew where everything was going, when it was, and when everything was going. And most of them are type A personalities that like to plan everything out ahead, and they know it's what's on
Right.
schedule, right?
Yeah.
And then when you throw that little snafu in there, that things tend to happen. So, what are some of the common things you see at your job now with people that are preparing for retirement?
The biggest one is honestly their post-military job, right? Now we've both, kind of talked a little bit about that, right? And my initial post-military job was as a contract canine handler. It was an hourly rate, right? Sure, I had my steady hours of, 50 hours a week, which was a lot more than I ever worked in the military.
Yep.
But, unless I was
Sometimes
deployed.
more. Sometimes more.
Yeah, on occasion I would work more during like exercises and whatnot, but
No,
in
I'm
the
talking about
grand
like
scheme of.
our contracting job. We
Oh
had
yeah,
sometimes more than
absolutely.
50 hours
Because
a
I
week.
actually did the math. Is like, now granted things were a little different whenever I was, a flight sergeant and was getting called in on my days off, but for the most part, if you worked your 12-hour shift, which is really a 13-hour shift, and you're in like Panama 12s, you're really only working like 30 something hours a week,
Hmm.
even with the extra hours, right? And you throw in a couple hours in for training, and sure, you might be right at 40. But like, and then here I am working, 50 hours or 60 hours a week, just to, get a decent paycheck. So, when you're on hourly, rates, if you work a little bit of overtime, you might get extra pay. If you don't quite get all of your hours in, or you take some vacation time or holiday pay, right? All of that changes your paycheck. So it could be different from, week to week to month, right? Um, Whereas if your salary, pretty much all your pay is going to be the same, right? Because your
Right.
salary, and there's just an expectation that you work these number of hours per week, but regardless of the number of hours you work, you're going to get paid the same. So getting a salary position post military kind of brings in the same or similar predictability, right?
Hmm.
Because you know that your paychecks are going to be very similar, but for a lot of people, right? I would say probably at least a third, if not closer to half of the population that gets out, ends up in some hourly form, right? At least initially, right? Whether that's your long-term job or not, but a good vast majority of veterans have what we refer to as a transition job, right? So
Or
it's
multiple transition jobs because they're trying to find where they fit in.
right. They if they've been longtime supervisors, they don't want all this responsibility. They don't want, supervising. They don't want this. They don't want that. So they take just something because they know they're getting a decent, pension. They're getting their VA disability. They're like, I don't need, this big lavish salary. I want to take a break, right? So then they go and they get this menial hourly, job, which is fine. It's great, until they, a year goes by and it's like, this is not what I want to do anymore, right?
Well, then they
um
get the itch to lead again. It's one of those things that they
yeah.
come back to. I really miss mentoring, and like that happened to me, right? Like I got out and I had an hourly job, and it was an hourly paycheck. It paid well. It paid well. So there was no complaint on that. But I was missing the responsibility. Like at first I enjoyed the no responsibility. Then I was
Mm,
missing the responsibility, right?
yes.
Because I was like, I mean, it's almost like you look at it and you go, I was doing more things than this. This is almost too easy. There's no challenge. Like I want to do something a little greater than this, right? Like because this is just simple. So
Yes.
it,
And
it's one of those things. You have those kind of things too, because like you said, there's nothing wrong with getting paid an hourly job, you know, 15, $20 an hour if that's what's going to satisfy you. But I see a lot of veterans go, okay, well, I'm destined for something greater, which is why they go into it. That'll bring me into my next topic because, of course, I want to touch back on financial stuff as we go along. But um, my next topic is, of course, uh, these veterans that sit there and they get these jobs and they finally find out like when I started taking my job here with you, the contracted canine job,
mhm.
my wife sat there and pulled me aside one day and she was like, "Don't you think that your personal self worth is just more than that because of the hours that
Absolutely.
you're working?" You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. We were busting our butts.
And
Uh,
we weren't getting paid we weren't getting compensated the right amount for us. I mean, at the time it was good,
Yes.
because it held us over.
Yes.
But when you look at it, my wife kind of sat me aside and she was like, "Yeah, but what are you worth? Because I think you're greater than just this. Like you're better than just this. You could do so much more."
Yeah, and I want to do a quick shout out to our wives because my I had a very similar conversation. So they are definitely the wise ones in this, endeavor. And I think it was, us going home and complaining constantly, and then we'd work together and complain to each other constantly, and
Yep.
it's just like, at what point do you stop complaining and take action, right? Um, and so, and that was a hard transition, I know, for both of us, right? I know at some point, like, I found myself, initially I was like, this is easy, right? This is
Right.
fantastic. I get to work with dogs again. I have more in this canine job than I did as canine in the military. I get a take home car, I get to take my dog home, right? I get everything paid for. It's fantastic. It's great. And the timing was a godsend because I was at the last month of my terminal leave when that job popped up. So I was getting ready to. It was either that or go be loss prevention at Home Depot for $19 an hour. You know, so I ended up taking that job because I was like, well, I know this job. I know it well. I know I can excel at it. And I did. And we both did. Right.
Right.
But at some point it became like I'm getting paid to literally do nothing except search a few cars here and there. And then eventually like do nothing is all I wanted to do. So I was getting angry when I had to work, or do this stupid task or that stupid task. Because I'm like, that makes no sense. Like, why are we doing that? Like,
Right.
we're not, because we weren't armed. And I think if we were armed, we would have been getting paid more, right? I know we had some positions that were armed, and I did not want that because I didn't want to wear the gear and all that, right? Otherwise, I would have gone law enforcement, um, which my body couldn't handle. And my I was just too lazy for it. Let's be honest. you know, but you know, I got to the point where I was getting angry in that I had to work while I was at work, right? Because it was like there was I enjoyed not having a challenge, but at the same time, yes, I needed that challenge.
Right. It
I
kind of
needed
it, it
something
kind
to
of goes
motivate me.
and it kind of goes into what I was just saying though, right? Like cuz you're like, yeah, this is easy. I'll do that. And then all of a sudden you're like, but in my own mind, I'm not challenged. I'm not there's no there's no challenge for me, right? Yeah, like you want to be challenged, you want to be a like I think it'd be different if the tempo of the job was a little higher. Like, and I'm not talking about hours wise. I'm talking about like
Yeah,
while you're at work, there's more things going on that keep you busy because the
and if
day
it
goes by
wasn't
quicker.
so monotonous, right?
Right.
And you know when you work those sites, it's the same people going in and out, you know. And then sometimes we were finding like the same car because they would go pick up people, from the gate
Mhm.
or whatever. And then so they leave, they come right back, and then they only have so much room, then more people come in, so they're going back and forth like all day. So I'm literally searching the same exact car that has never been left unattended, never, any of that. Like, why do I need to keep searching the same car over and over? And I get it. I did it because it was the policy, it was the rules, that was my
Right.
job. So of course I did it. But like as soon as you see them pull up, you're like, oh, this car again. Like,
Yep.
so then I found it like because there was no change, right? It became very monotonous, and then it was like, well, if I'm gonna get paid to do nothing, I might as well do nothing, right? Rather than doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And so, I mean, people can go like, well, you're a canine, you can change things up to a certain degree, sure. Like we could go plant some training aids somewhere, and but you're limited in the areas you can go because we couldn't leave, right?
So it goes into the challenging part of the contracting thing, right? Because it's a contract. You can't deviate from a contract. If the contract says you need to be there from these hours, it's like, hey, we have a whole building we could train in. That's great, but we can't because it's just the two of us, and one of us has to be there. So you're planting your own problem. Like that
Which is
was it was a
beneficial for the dog, but not for you.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just not. It's just challenging throughout that job, but it translates over to every job that a veteran can get into, right? Like they can get into any jobs. But if it's a transitional job for you, I think the best thing to do is find something that's going to challenge you. Um, your first job is not going to be your career when you get out of the military. That's not going to be your future career or
No,
what you.
not likely. I think the stat is it's like 70 or 80% of
Yeah.
veterans don't they go through at least one job, if not multiple jobs, before they settle into a career.
Yes. And that's I think that's a big challenge for it. And as much as the military prepares you, and there are things that it prepares you for, like because it does prepare you for a hard work ethic, it does prepare you for challenging situations, and we've talked about this before where it doesn't prepare you to get out very well. However,
No.
the skills do translate over, and some of those skills are just, we think they're easy to get rid of, like, oh, I don't have to, I'm no longer a supervisor, I don't have to worry about my phone ringing every day, for little stuff. But then all of a sudden you start going, eh, kind of want my phone to start ringing every day.
Yeah.
I
Like,
kind of just, it's a hard habit to break because you're like, yeah, yeah, but I get it. I'm a Walmart greeter and it's an easy job, but I
mhm.
really miss trying to help people succeed. And I really miss trying to help my people out and leading, and having a task, having a mission, and then completing and succeeding and all that stuff.
Yeah,
That's kind of
and
difficult.
I would definitely say like a big thing for me in the reason I left wasn't primarily the stagnation of the job or the loss of challenge. Sure, that was a big reason, but the majority for me was the flexibility. Like when you go, especially being in security forces, in any security or law enforcement job, right? Like you can't just leave. Like you get a phone call from your kid's school and it's like, hey, your daughter or your son is sick, right? So you can't just leave work and go pick them up and take them home and take care of them. A lot of jobs do offer that, but the security or other type jobs don't, right? And so that was the biggest reason because um as you saw, right, when we worked together, I had encountered a few times where my son couldn't go to school for whatever reason, right? Pink eye one time.
The
The
school shut
there
down. The school
Oh, there
shut
was
down early.
oh yeah, there was I think we were there. Goodness, we were there for some major storm was rolling in. And it was like they were worried about traffic, so they were cutting loose. Like the installation commander was telling people to go home, right? So yeah, so we had to get permission to get cut loose early, and then it was a nightmare trying to, and then I had to go pick. Yeah, it was a whole thing. And then on top of that, my wife was pregnant, with my daughter,
Yeah.
right? So now I'm looking at I have a 5-year-old son getting ready to turn 6 that I can't be flexible and go, pick up from school if I need to. But my wife is about to have a baby. And we all know lots and lots of things can happen the last minute with a baby, right? And so I wanted the flexibility to be able to one, be there for my wife, and two, be there for my kids. I think I had spent enough of my 20-year career not being there.
Yes.
And so that was the number one factor for me.
And
Um,
I'm glad you brought that up because that's another thing that we got to think about too. Like, we spent 20 years or 13 years for me, right? You spent 20 years um being at the whim of the Department of Defense, or if you're a first responder, being at the whim of a department in the community, right? And you're sacrificing birthdays, holidays, Christmases, special events, births of children, right? Like births of children. Like we've missed a lot of things throughout our lives that, when you finally get out, you're like, that's one thing that's a non-negotiable for me. Like that is not negotiable. And maybe you don't learn it until later on,
mhm.
right? In your career path, but it's a non-negotiable. Like I have to be there for my family. If my family needs me, that is my top priority.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't think that way when I initially was getting out, right? like I did, but I didn't, right? I did. I looked at it as, well, I'm retired, right? I'll have the opportunity to be there for my kids, right? Because I don't have to be somewhere. Well, then I got that job, and it turned out that I couldn't, right? I couldn't be there for my son's plays, and well, let me retract. I could have, but not without serious consequence, such as losing my job, right? Getting fired, and then I don't have a paycheck, right? Well, what would have happened if I didn't show up for work at, in the military? Would have started off with some paperwork, maybe eventually gotten, demoted or something, but I'm not necessarily right off the bat looking at getting fired, right?
And it's funny you mentioned that because in the military, like there's a level of consequence, right? Like
Right.
it's almost like the military understands people are going to have days, they're going to have mistakes.
Yes.
But the contracting world, you have to be perfect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
it's it's just the kind of the way that that thought process was, and you know, but that's what I'm talking about though. Like you thought when you first took the job, like, oh, same as me, right? Like, oh, I've done it for so long. If I have to sacrifice a little bit, my family's done it with me before, they understand. But then when it starts getting to that point where it's like, what? But for what? For what? I mean, for what? Because now I'm sacrificing
Why?
my self worth and what my health and my family life for what? Right? A paycheck? You know, and that's kind of where it came down to. And then you kind of learned what your non-negotiable was. You said your non-negotiable was that flexibility, and you
Yes.
you
And
said that.
yeah. And as the time went along in that job, my non-negotiables kept adding up, because you start to realize things, right, that you didn't realize when you're in the military, because you knew, I have to do this, right? Because I don't want to get in trouble. I want to be able to promote. I want to do this. I want to do that, right? You're in the military. And so you have all of these, if you do this, this won't happen, or if you do it this way, it could potentially happen, So to get into the civilian sector and think, I now have the opportunity to do what I want to do, right? Be there for my kids, do this. And so, initially it was, oh, well, this is daytime, it's day shift, right? Sure, 6 a.m. freaking sucks. I ain't gonna lie, right?
Right.
That's a start time of 6 a.m., which means I gotta be up,
At
4 o'clock.
4:30,
It's
yeah,
like, like, I was like, I had to get up this early for day shift in the military, but like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to be up at 4:30 every day for the rest of my life. Like, no. Um, and then it was, well, I need you to work this site, but I don't want to, but I need you to. Well, what if I don't? Well, then, like, you're not going to fire me because you don't have the manpower to fire me. And as long as I'm working this site, technically, like, I
I'm on the job. Your
right,
contract's getting
I'm on
met.
the job, right? But then what happens if I don't do this? Well, then I may not get the site that I want. I may, maybe I get my hours cut if bring more people on board, or, whatever. Like, there's negative consequences to everything, right? And so, because I would tell my wife, like, hey, I have to work late today. Why? Like, you're a contractor. You don't have to if you don't want to. I was like,
That's funny how they say that too.
if it was only that simple, right? Because while in the military it's based around primarily, logic, regulations, things like that. There's an order to things.
When
And
it
sure,
comes to
there's
the
a lot of
military,
them.
when it comes
No,
to the
go.
military, let's use the term logic very loosely because we all
Well,
know that
I said
sometimes.
logic, not common sense.
Okay, that makes it a little more. That makes it a little easier to swallow.
We'll just stick with that, right? And I'm very logical. I'm sure you know that,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So trying to look at things from a logical perspective was hard when your leaders, and I use with an S, right, are emotional, right? Whether that's their personal emotions or whatever, So, and when there's a lack of order and logic to things, that's very hard, right? Because even in the military, sure, I felt my fair share of lack of logic. Let's put it that way.
I think we all
A
have.
lack thereof. All right, and so I was, because I'm so logical, I always questioned. that lack of logic. Like why?
And you know, it's
You know,
but it's funny though, because you think that you, when we were in, right, we thought we only saw it in the military. Like this only happens in the military. That logic goes out the window sometimes, and emotional thinking happens, and this doesn't happen in the civilian world, right? Like a regular job doesn't do this. Like, and then you get out and you go, yep, it doesn't
it
change no matter
does.
where you
Yep,
go.
it does. It
It's the
absolutely
same
does.
thing, right? And it kind of brings me into the next question, right? So we've talked about, we talked, you actually asked this question offline before we started the show. And the military and the first responders world, like because we are paramilitary and the first responders as well, like they promote a lot of good habits and they promote a lot of habits and habit forming, right? Um, what happens when you don't have that anymore, where those habits are acceptable, right? And then you get out and you're now a banker at Wells Fargo.
You know, so it's like things that you learn to do in the military that you either one don't translate very well, to the civilian world, or translate very well, right? Well, I can tell you
Or you don't know how to translate them on
that's
paper,
true,
or you don't know how to
right?
translate them to the civilian world.
That's very true. Um, I'm gonna use an example, right? And it's the phonetic alphabet, right? And so we all learn the same phonetic alphabet in the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe many civilian law enforcement have a different variation, right? Like
Got a
Adam
story on
instead
that
of
one.
Alpha, or like they use the first name type thing, right? And David instead of Delta, right? But the concept is the same, right? And
Correct.
so when we are talking, like I still use it with my wife today, right? Like to this day I still use it. Like if she says a word and I'm not quite sure which version of the word, or like, did you say alpha, or did like I used our phonetic alphabet all the time at
Or you
home.
or you do it when you travel, right? And you go to the
Yes.
airport and they go, okay, you're at gate C7, Charlie 7. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Right.
I
And it's
also use it when I'm on the phone with people. uh like they'll, because phone calls can be hard to hear, so I'll say it and they're like, can you say that again? And then so I'll spell it out phonetically, right? Because that's all I know. I don't know, like I'll be like, B as in Bravo. Most people say
right.
B as in boy, or G
Right.
as in giraffe. And it's just like, no, G as in
And
golf.
and it's funny
you know?
because like the B's, the T's, the P's, they all sound
Yep,
the same on a
exactly.
phone, right? And it's
Right.
hard to be like, well, how do you like give it to me, man? And it's funny because you mentioned that law enforcement has a phonetic alphabet as well. I have a story on that. Um,
I love
my
stories.
department did have a very different phonetic alphabet than what the military had. And if we used military terminology instead of their terminology, if you were in field training, you would get dinged. Or
Oof. And
if you're
that's
not in
a
field,
hard habit to break.
yeah, and if you're not in field
Woo!
training and it just kind of slips out because that's what you're used to, like for ours, B was Baker. But if I said Bravo, stand by for a phone call, and then you'd get your butt chewed by the dispatcher, and you're like, dude, like you got to remember, I did 20 years in the military. Like it's not easy to break. So I have two different phonetic alphabets going on in my head, and it's not simple. It's not a simple thing to really break. And that's a good example. But what are some other ones that you've seen? Because I can list quite a few of them. Um, I'll tell you, or you know what? Before you answer that question, I'll tell you one that I've seen is we kind of talked about the leadership portion and how you want responsibility. Is people that are the Walmart greeters that are like, no, I'm still in charge of this, right? Like this is my, and they kind of overstep their bounds sometimes because they want to do more, which is usually good for an employer. Like the employees want to step up and do more, but the direct supervisor goes, no, dude, this is your lane.
Yes.
Just stay here. Yeah, but
Yes.
if I want to get better, I have to take on more responsibility. Not without permission, dude.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of times you have to have that permission. That's not that is true to the civilian world, because when you're in the military, they could give you some random job, right?
Hmm.
And expect you to perform, right? Maybe throw you through some training, right? So here's a few examples, right? So back when I was stationed at Davis Monthan and got put into police services, after a couple of months of being in that position and proving my worth, they were like they started throwing extra jobs at me, right? So then I became the program manager for the new fingerprint machines, right?
Right.
Which were new to the military, DODY, brand new.
So nobody
They
has
had
a
been
clue what's
right.
going on with them.
They had been around in the civilian law enforcement for many years. That's because it was a live scan, right?
Hmm.
um, but they had not been in the military, and the military as a whole took some pretty big dings from FBI, DOJ, right, and our failure to report, and a lot of that had to do with a particular military person who should not have had access to weapons because he had been convicted of a domestic violence, but under military rule.
What? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so and then went in and did a mass shooting, right? Um, so yeah, shocker, right? So because of that incident, like the military got dinged hard, right? So then they revamped the program, came in on live scan. So I got hit with that one, and then I got hit with this, other. So I was by the time I was done with that position, I was running 10 different programs and had to go to school for this and had to go to school for that. But because I was in the military, that was well within my allowance, right? They were allowed to throw these at me as long as I could handle them physically, emotionally, everything else, right? I was and being proficient at it, I was able to handle it. Whereas the civilian, like even the federal civilians, they could say, well, that's not in my job description. You can't make me do that, right?
Right.
You can
And
rewrite my contract and we can renegotiate, which I would be more than happy to do it, but it's not in writing that it's part of my job description.
but you look at it, and I'll break it down even further than that, right? Like, these brand new privates and airmen that are sitting there at the gate, they're gate guards. Not a hard job. The only requirement is you stay awake, right?
That's more challenging sometimes.
But that's their literally, as if you have a pulse and you could stay awake, congratulations, you could do the gate guard duty,
Yeah.
right?
Well, now they have two responsible. Stay awake and use D-bids.
Right, right. But I mean, still, it's a very, very, very simple thing to do.
Yes.
However, that brand new person that just came into the military can also be in charge of the entire base because we train him that way,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So that's kind of where the challenge is too.
Yeah. And you're also you take someone like even at Davis Monthan when I was there and how the rules changed. Like was, a 15, 16 year, E6, right? And we're asking 18, 19, 20 year olds who've been in the military 6 months or less to make life decisions, in an instant, right? And potentially decisions that could seriously harm or kill someone, right?
Absolutely, life or death.
Right. And I use this one as the prime example because it was such a big time when I was there was gate runners,
Hmm.
right? And so for those who aren't aware that when you come up to military installation, think, immigration checkpoint or something like that, where you have to go through a checkpoint, you have to stop, you have to present your identification, you have to be told, have a nice day, and you're granted entry, right? If you choose to just drive right through and not stop, it's called a gate runner, right?
The little button.
And, yep. And so we've had the barriers probably 80-90% of my career, right? And so it came down to for the longest time it was always if they presented a threat, right? Well, now you're asking this 18, 19, 20-year old to interpret what that means, right? And then make the decision of whether to push that button or not. And I can tell you from experience that prior to certain orders coming out, that 9 times out of 10, they did not push the button,
I believe it.
right? Because they were fearful, right? They were fearful of any consequences of making the wrong decision, right? And so now the rest of like myself as a flight sergeant, and in charge of an entire patrol, right? The entire shift for the night. Now we're going around an entire installation searching for this person because they aren't supposed to be on base. We don't know what their intentions are, and we're doing a high risk traffic stop, guns out, everything.
So
And
I got a question on that, and then we're gonna wrap up here in a few. But my question on that is because I saw it not only in the military, the same thing, right? I also saw it in the civilian world with policing too. Because what are some of the external factors that you saw that probably influence that person to not push the button instead of, yeah, like, hey, if they're running it, it's considered a threat, right? Like, because that's simple. If they're running it, it's considered a threat, but then they have to interpret it like, yeah, but is he really? Right?
yeah.
And I saw it a lot in civilian law enforcement as well. And I mean, I have my personal views on it. I think sometimes, and I'll break it down to you the way I see it. I think society and the way they're viewed in society and like social media and what they say about
Hmm.
that job, military, law enforcement, paramedic, doctor, you name it, right? Like, I think that the impact that society has on what people think played a factor a little bit. And that's just my belief. And I also think that society dictated how leaders change policy sometimes too. And that's just in any job. But
In the law enforcement spectrum, and we can include military law enforcement because a lot of our training was very similar.
yes,
I'm going to say that's 98% true. And because we, there was like two versions of training, right? There was your use of force training, right? So the level of force that is appropriate to be used, right, in certain situations. And the barriers are considered less than lethal, right? They're a stopping force to prevent a vehicle from entering. Um, but then so you get that on one day of training, and then the next day of training you get, you know social media, be careful what you say, how do you talk to people, like you're always being watched, there's cameras everywhere, everybody's always recording you, you have to do this. And so it was like there was one side that said you should be doing this, but then there's the other side was be careful, you're always being watched, right? So there was always that fear instilled in people because you just have to assume you're being watched, right? And so you get to, and we've experienced this downrange too, in that you make a either a lack of decision or the wrong decision because of fear of the decision, right?
correct. And the
And
repercussions of the decision and
right,
what the fallout is, either societal, leadership wise, or anything
right.
like that.
And it's, if you push that button to deploy the barrier, what is the consequence, right? Well, you could be sued individually by the
Uh,
person for pushing the button on them. You could get in trouble for inadvertently using the barriers when you shouldn't have been using the barriers, for misinterpreting, what a threat was versus what a non-threat was, when in reality, only you can interpret what is a threat, right?
right, right,
It's not a threat to the insulation, to the property. It's what do you perceive as a threat, which is different for everybody,
right.
right? And I tried very, very hard to give my airmen a lot of leeway, and guidance and everything else when it came to the barriers, but yet no matter what I did, I never saw them actually enact it. And we had real world,
Yeah, yeah.
gate runners, right?
And it's
um
just the thought process that goes on, and it's kind of tough, right? Like,
right.
you,
Or
it,
there's well, as soon as you have a gate runner, you have to do this, 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 and this, and push the button. And it's like you can't give these young individuals too much to worry about, right? Because now they're worried about getting on the radio, calling in a vehicle description, calling in the number of occupants, calling in a license plate, getting this information, getting this information. Oh crap, I forgot to push the button. And
of course,
meanwhile, you've got 200 yards before that car passes the barrier, and that barrier is ineffective. By the time you've done step A through E, they're already past the barrier, and then it's
Right.
too late, and I heard that half the time. It was like, well, by the time I got ready to push the button, it was too late.
Or they're reading a checklist
That too,
going,
right?
did it meet this criteria? Did it meet
Yeah.
this criteria? Did it meet this
So
criteria?
eventually, because of the feedback from the field, eventually a general officer came down and said, no matter what you perceive, if they run the gate, you will push the button. Step one, right? Don't call it in. Step one is you push the button. After you push the button, you call it in, right? Then we started seeing the deployments of the barriers go off, because we still had the same number of gate runners, but eventually we saw them decrease.
Oh, that's
But
good.
um, but there for a while, because we had such a rash, Air Force wide, not just at Davis Monthan, but Air Force wide, there was a rash of gate runners.
I think
Some of
DoD
them were
wide.
deadly.
It wasn't just Air Force. It was
No,
DoD
you're
wide.
right. You're right. And some of them were deadly. There was one out in the base that's out in New Jersey, the training base.
Lake and her
Uh,
Dix, Fort
yep,
Dix,
yep.
Lake and
They
Heat,
had a
or
gate
Lake and
runner,
Hers.
and the gate guards actually opened fire on the vehicle and killed the driver. Now they weren't, they did the right thing, right? They were in the right. They were justified in their actions, but you still got to go under investigation. And that's the other piece of things, right? Is that if you use force, now you have to go under investigation, right?
Yep.
That may or may not mean that you have to get relieved of duty while a pending investigation, because they can't allow you to arm up if you incorrectly used force. And it's just like this this whole thing, right? So people were in such fear all the time of doing the right thing. And that's honestly a big reason why I did not go law enforcement when I retired. Because in 2022, the societal outlook on law enforcement was so negative, right? That I was just like, I don't want to be walking on eggshells every time I go to work. I
Yes.
want to go to work and be able to do my job, not be, oh, I'm on administrative leave pending an investigation because I did this while being filmed by someone that was 20 feet away.
And absolutely, and that'll be another topic for another episode, because I
Yeah.
want to get into
Uh,
that. I do want to get into that, and especially with Wick when he gets back on.
mhm.
But yeah, I saw that, and I see the same thing, and I just I was kind of curious as what your thoughts on it, and I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that as well. But closing thoughts today, man. First off, it's good to be back, and we had our vacations and stuff like that. We did an episode last week that I'm going to release, and but it's good to be back on here with you, and spend a good 45 minutes, hour long with you, buddy. But any final thoughts for the show?
I always enjoy sharing experiences and how they translate, right? Especially for those that are getting close to that point, that uh while the grass is green, it's not always greener,
Yeah,
right?
very true.
Maybe a little watering will help that. Right? But I also don't want to make people fearful of the change, because it's already scary enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can't do the military forever. You can't. So unless you're financially capable of just not working when you're done with the military, good for you. Uh, but,
I
but
wish.
I know, right? That is not the case for the majority of us. So you have to work, and it's an experience, right? And the reasons for you getting out or retiring are yours and yours alone. And you may or may not find your dream job right when you get out. You may get lucky, but if you don't feel bad. You're with the majority of us who didn't find your dream job. I love what I do now. I get to stay engaged with the military community. I get to coach and help people and mentor them, through some of the worst things to talk about, which is finances.
Yep.
Most
Yep.
people are very personal when it comes to that, because as a society we don't like to talk about that, right? So it But it's very rewarding and very challenging, um and it's also hard, from a personal standpoint, and the money side, because it's not just high paying salary, right? I have to earn my keep, if you will.
Yes.
But what you do in the military will forever make you the person that you are. and don't let go of all that for the sake of fitting in, right?
Amen.
You already fit in with the veteran community and with the military community, and if that job or that company can't accept you for who you are and for what you do, unless of course you're just being nasty and whatever, but
Right.
then it's not the right fit for you, right? You should be able to be yourself and enjoy your life and take care of your family all at the same time.
And with that said, if you fit all those criteria, come on in the show and talk to us and share your story. We are the Outranked Podcast. I'm Rafael Rhodes. I'm here with Steve Lewis. No, Steve Nowicki will be back with us soon. He's been busy as well, so we do miss that guy, but he'll be back here soon. So Wick, we'll talk to you in a little bit. But for everybody else, you can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. Instagram is Outrank Pod. Facebook, the Outrank Podcast. TikTok, Outrank Podcast One. And you can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. Again, thank you guys for listening. I'm Raphael. This is Steve. And happy birthday to Steve Lewis. So if you guys want to blow up his social media account, happy birthday to Steve Lewis.
Thank you.
Um, enjoy your birthday, bud. And we will see you guys on the next episode.
Absolutely.